I was distracted by the mustache. Audio version, obviously must be the best one. Um, anyways, we're not here to talk mustaches and facial hair. We're here to talk Diablo, and it's been a little while since we chatted. Um, I think the most normal question that we start this podcast with is, what is your recent play? What have you been playing, even if it isn't Diablo? What have you been up to? Nine ball.
So I'm playing through the campaign again because you know how you can take like different pathways through the story as you're going through and playing, and I thought that was a great opportunity to just like try out a different build as well. And so unfortunately, it's like on the one hand, like going through and like playing like a meta build does make the game like really really easy, but at the same time, it's fun just stomping everything. I am of course talking about Armored Core. Yeah. Yeah, no, I have played a little bit of Diablo, but that's just because I had to be a purist. I got Armored Core for the PlayStation, but that's also how Neve plays Diablo 4 on the PlayStation. So occasionally I get kicked off of playing Armored Core, and then I played Diablo 4 on the PC. But yeah, no, most of my playtime I'm now in the new game plus plus in Armored Core to unlock the third ending before I can then start going through to S rank all of the missions. It's been everything that I wanted. It's great. I'm having a lot of fun with this one as opposed to kind of like not being thrilled with Armored Core 4 or 5. I felt that it brought some of the feel. I want to say like some of the soul of the Armored Core games, but that has different connotations when you're talking about From Software nowadays. But it definitely brought back some of the feeling of the older titles. And hey, if you want to just try the game and see if it's for you, just equip double Zimmermans and go have fun. That's pretty much it.
It is an absolute blast. Nerdboards, what are you playing?
So I did over the weekend with the XP and the gold increase for the weekend. I did jump into Diablo a little bit. I've kind of been bouncing between Baldur's Gate, Diablo 4, and then Starfield, which launched in early access on Friday. Probably spending the majority of the time in Starfield, but I did hit 100 on the Sork. I did finally take down Uber Lilith and a Nightmare 100 dungeon, so that was really cool. Check those boxes off, which is great. I felt like this was the best season to do it with with the malignant hearts and stuff. There's just such a power increase. I'm sure there's gonna be more power increases as we move through the other seasons, but I wanted to be sure, right, that I got it done. And that the barber heart just makes it to where every build is pretty much viable at this point. So hey, took her down with chain lightning, which felt pretty good. I wasn't able to cheese every mechanic, but I did, take her down in, I mean, probably like 5 minutes. So I did skip some of the mechanics, but not like the way the Blizzard build just kind of just skips the whole fight basically. So I had to dodge a little bit. It took hours really of learning, and going through it, but I got through it. Very satisfying once you do complete it for sure. But and then I started a necro actually. So I got a necro to like 87 or 88, something like that in the season. Just because my girlfriend, she's playing necro pretty heavy on the console, and she's almost hitting level 90. So I really wanted to kind of like learn the necro a bit more, and I've played the Sork backwards and forwards since betas and launch. So I jumped into the Necro, played that quite a bit. I played the Rogue at launch as well. So this was a nice change of pace. But I'm definitely enjoying the Necro quite a bit. And then just really just messing around with different builds with the Sork. I really want to make a Meteor build work, but it's still kind of meh. So yeah, playing a little bit of Diablo. But honestly, since Friday, aside from jumping in and really doing some XP grinding on Saturday and Sunday with Diablo, most of my time has been in Starfield. It seems like the reviews in that game are very mixed, but I am definitely enjoying the hell out of it as a Fallout and Mass Effect fanboy. I'm having a lot of fun. I think it's a great game. I think it has its flaws for sure, but I mean, I don't see me not playing that game anytime soon. So it's one of the talk about New Game Plus. There's actually an armor you can get in that game for doing a 10th New Game Plus,
Oh,
and
geez.
I anticipate getting there eventually, a long time from now, eventually. But yeah, I'm living out my space fantasy. Let's just put it that way. It's really fun. But yeah, the weekend was good for Diablo. Great XP gains and gold gains, which was nice. Built up some good economy and took down some check boxes I needed to take down since launch. So
I did
Nice.
I did do one thing this weekend that I just remembered. But it was Diablo 3, not Diablo 4, because I was missing 2 primals for my final unlock at the
Oh,
altar. Yeah, and so I spent a good chunk of time Friday night just going through and running rifts in Diablo 3 before they finally dropped for me.
nice.
And it was like,
Nice.
of course, I probably had done close to like 50 rifts over the past couple of weeks, without having like a primal drop like at all, and then they fell like within like 10 minutes of one another. It's like 3 rifts
Nice.
or something like that at the very end.
Not
Sorry,
to
Sam, for cutting you
shame
off.
it. No, I think it's I think you bring up some good points to piggyback on. So today's episode is going to be very Diablo 4 focused, as I think we have a tendency to do because it is the newest game. But we do know there is a new Diablo 3 season coming soon. We know there's going to be Diablo 2 ladder reset soon. So there's a lot more on the horizon. I think once that fully hits, we'll definitely bring it up. But it's so much easier to focus on D4. I too, nerdwords, find myself diving in to soak up a little bit of that extra XP. Um, I was playing this morning on a Sork while I was running because it's miserable outside, so like running inside made more
Miserable. We're in
sense.
Wisconsin, brother. It's not even that hot. Come on, man.
It was like un it was uncomfortable.
I was in Vegas 2 weeks ago. That was uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's
You
because
walk
it's an
outside and you
affront
feel
to
like you're in a.
God. Like you're not supposed to live in the desert. Um,
That's what they
like
developed air conditioning for, right?
yeah. Um,
Yep.
it's a desert. Anyways,
Sorry.
so I did get a chance to dive in, and I've been playing a little bit on there. I still have my goals that I want to achieve, but I'm also feeling pretty content with what I've done so far in Diablo, and I think that is something we'll kind of get into as we dig into. So the focus for today is Gamescom, right? Gamescom happening over in Germany. Diablo 4 is there. We talked about it last episode. We get the reveal of the Season of Blood. We got Gemma Chan coming on to voice a character, which is cool. Um, and that almost is a different conversation for a different day of like, hey, do we always need a special guest star for it? But okay, never mind. Um, I'm going to tangent myself, which we don't want. But the
I
focus is
could
on,
tangent off of your tangent.
I know. It's dangerous. We can't do it. We can't do it.
Screen Actors Guild is going to be voting soon in order to strike against video game studios, and there's only, I think, 6 of them named, and of course, Activision Blizzard is one of them. So
Yeah,
we might not have guest stars for season 3 if it hasn't been recorded already.
yeah, that wouldn't be. It reminds me of kind of like later season Simpsons, where it was then more about the guest star showing up than about the actual content. It's nothing against Gemma Chan. She's I've enjoyed her in everything I've seen her in, but does it make my Diablo game better with her voice? Uh, I don't know. I don't know if that's as much of the focal point as I want, but that's a tangent. What we want to talk about is all the stuff that came out of Gamescom, in particular. Um, one interview that I think we all agreed was the most revealing on many fronts, and that was the one courtesy of GameSpot. The interview combo that they had. It's rare to call it gaming journalism, right? Uh, Gaming journalism is weird because often it is co-opted by gaming companies, and it's just print advertisement, right? So when you see interviewers asking real questions, it feels refreshing. And I think in the case of Rod Ferguson and Chris Wilson, also, were you surprised that there's a Chris Wilson working for Diablo 4?
No, I know 1,000 Chris Wilsons in real life. Not really. I know like 6 though for real. So it's a pretty common name.
It's just, you got Diablo
It is
4, you
pretty
got
funny.
Path of
It is
Exile.
funny,
It
yeah.
is
Um,
really funny. He
I,
seems like
No.
a sweet human.
oh,
I've
absolutely.
never interacted with Diablo's Chris Wilson, but he seemed very kind in the interview.
Yeah, he seemed happy to be there. And then the interview started. So we're going to talk about
Yeah. Yeah.
that interview. and really kind of go into the meat of what gets brought out in it. So let's set the scene. We have Gamescom happening. They are given an interview with Rod Ferguson and Diablo 4's Chris Wilson. And they start just kind of going in on questions. And their line of questioning, and we discussed a little bit pre-show, I thought was great. It was this nice line. They weren't overly antagonistic, but they did bring up things that, like in a campfire chat, or in, a much more sanitized environment, may not be said or may not be brought up. And I think that led to more genuine reaction. And there's been a little bit of pushback within the community about what was said in here. And I think there is some level of hyperbole around some of the comments that people like to latch on to. But then there's also some, just like with anything that any part of hyperbole, there's kernels of truth in it that can want you to exaggerate. So let's start with what comes up, kind of first is the five bosses, right? The Gamescom interviewers bring up like, hey, so you talk about bringing back five bosses. Um, what's that going to be? Are you just going to recycle old ones? Are they really new? And I don't know if you guys saw it, the body language, and we might over interpret, but like the sentiment around Rod's language kind of presented of just like, oh, by saying yes to this, am I going to upset people?
Yeah.
But then he just kind of alludes that a lot of these new bosses that we're going to see, these pinnacle bosses, are going to be recycled from the campaign. And we've talked about it time and time again on the show that that is something that we would love to see, right?
Mhm.
But that, like, ooh, I don't know. And then they also go upon alluding that this was not something that they had originally kind of planned for the season, but they're going to just slap it in anyway. Like, oh, we could probably just do this. It'll be fine. Um, what were your thoughts around this, and at least in this section of the interview?
It's definitely interesting how, just phrasing can change, the entire um way that you like view something, because it is like one of those things. Being able to go back and replay act bosses and something that Rod Ferguson had mentioned like in his answer is something that a lot of the community has asked about, not having to play through the campaign in order to go through and fight like some of the really, some of the really cool boss fights like Andariel, or the Skosman
Astaroth,
boss Astaroth.
Duriel.
There we go. Thank you.
Yep.
Um, so it's it'd be cool to have a way of accessing those fights to go through and replay them. But obviously going through and putting it as, oh, are you just reusing old bosses? It takes a different spin on it. But I mean, overall, I'm fine with them going through and bringing back some of the act bosses in order to go through and play through those mechanics again at tuned to a higher level.
Yeah, you spoke about body language a bit. I had a hard time not reading body language to that entire interview. As a manager, um, there were moments where Chris would be talking and Rod was just like right in his ear canal, staring directly at him, like, "You saying the right thing?" This is what it felt like. Right? He was very closely watching that. The body language between those two was very interesting. But yeah, I mean, I think that he definitely, when he was asked the question, when Rod answered the question, he didn't directly answer. It was very much a political response, but he, in so many words, say, yes, we're going to reuse some bosses, but there will also be some new content as well. It's kind of like what he skirted around. It was a really, when the answer to a question is that lengthy, you know that there's some hyperbole being injected for sure. But that said, like at the end of the day, like Diablo 2, Diablo 3, Diablo 4, I mean, we always reuse the same bosses. It's not like in new seasons for Diablo 3 or Diablo, ladders for Diablo 2, we got new boss content. Like, so I mean, I think that that's a win if that's something you're into and interested in. And I definitely want to fight Andariel again. I'd like to fight Astaroth again. I'd be into fighting Duriel again and finding different iterations. He also mentioned in that question that it's not really just go kill a boss. There's like a boss ladder, which I'm very interested to see how that works. That seems
Yeah.
interesting. But there was a moment in this and in other parts of the interview where Rod Ferguson came off more than I've ever seen him before as either annoyed or condescending or both. Where he over-explained like the quantitative conversation, like where I felt like he was talking down to me like he was my father. There's little moments like that where I'm like, whoa, like it felt like he was caught off guard and on his back foot kind of got defensive a little bit. I might be reading too much into it too, but I think that the questions that the game, I was shocked that GameSpot was asking those kinds of questions. Like, let's be honest about gaming journalism typically and how it goes, especially from some of the bigger outlets like that. But they asked some really direct questions. They kind of took some steps back in some of the other questions later, but yeah, I think that. I mean, the answer made sense. We weren't going to get a direct answer in that regard. I would have loved to just be like, yes, we're going to reuse some bosses. We're also going to add in a couple new ones. You'll have to wait and see when we reveal. That would have been a great answer without any sort of irritation. But I guess when you're doing an interview on the spot like that, you get kind of caught off guard and you just start, being very careful with what you're saying. So, I'm sure that was part of it too.
Yeah, I think that is fair. And we've seen that Rod has a tendency to bloviate a little bit, and I sometimes to his detriment. And I think this was an interview where that kind of seemed to happen. Um, I felt like the next question, um, is probably the most sanitized version of why do you think players aren't enthralled
Yeah.
that I've heard. Because the question is, when do you start to pick up on the general sentiment from the audience? Which is a beautiful question, right? Because you're not saying what the sentiment is,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
but hey, here we are. It's, August at the time. And for you, Leviathan, it's September 5th. Um, but it's August at the time, and they're going in, and it's been a month since the start of the season. We've talked briefly, we know Twitch viewership is down. Twitch is not the main metric for anything, but I was just reading a Reddit post today of like, well, there's only 1,000 people watching Diablo, despite the major games that are out right now that will draw attention. But whatever. That's not the main metric, but it is. There has been a shift there, and they do bring this up, which I thought was interesting. Like, it comes out, the game comes out, it gets scored really, really well, and then, that's the second question when we'll go into that one with this vocal minority, but they're very much getting to the point of the game isn't as popular right now as what you thought it would be. When did you figure that out? And then Rod goes on, and we hear about medicine and sugar and salads. Um,
That's the moment one of the moments I was talking about where I felt like, you ever watch The Office? It's like that
yes.
episode where Michael is trying to figure out the financials of his own paper company. And he's like, hey, can you explain to me like I'm 10? And he still doesn't understand. He's like, can you explain to me like I'm 5? And it felt like I was being explained to like I was 5. Like, dude, I get what you're saying, but you sound like a dickhead right now. So, yeah, that was rough.
So let's dig in on this answer a bit, to a beautifully worded question. Um, the sentiment. How do you know about sentiment? And we have Chris Wilson kind of going in like, we've got metrics and we look at data, and they know how many people are playing their game at any given moment.
Right.
So, like, they're not going to come out and directly say that. Like, oh, we know we got like 40, let's say it's 400,000 people playing currently right now. We're doing great. They can't tell us that. They're not going to do
Right.
that. But they have a good idea at least. Then I felt like that's a logical answer. And then Rod goes into Rod stuff. So general thoughts, key takeaways for you guys from that question.
I mean, it basically it was the in line with my expectations.
Yeah.
There's obviously them going through and talking about that you have the internal data, you have the internal metrics, you have, of course, the social media, Reddit forums, and such in order to go through feedback. And then I think one of the ones that I had the most interest in was how they actually kind of use those individual player surveys to then kind of, temper the results, because the data isn't going to tell you everything. It's not going to tell you how people feel about the game, because we all know it. We've all probably done it many times, where there's a game that you don't feel like playing, but you want to grind out like that last achievement or reward, so you keep logging in and doing it because that primal won't drop. Stupid altar. So then of course there is the, as we will get to, the vocal minority, on the internet, that is always mad about everything, regardless of whether they have a good point or not. They're just mad. And then, finding a way in order to try and find, how the survey results will come in to try and get a feel, in between, some of those points, to get a more, direct, response from them.
Yeah, similar to Nine Ball, it's what I expected. I just didn't expect Rod to get into such a, again, it felt like a very condescending answer when he got into it. Like we didn't understand, that nerfs aren't great, and sometimes we need to get, our medicine with some sugar. Like that whole analogy made me want to just gouge. It was so cringy. And I thought Chris answered the question very well. I didn't feel like it needed additional, hyperbole from Rod.
Right.
And that's what I meant about their body language and kind of how he was on his back foot a bit, right? I thought Chris answered the question very well, but Rod felt like he needed to elaborate a bit further, and he just came off kind of like a jerk.
Yeah, I guess I didn't feel like he was like being condescending or anything like that, but I do feel, because as it continues on the conversation about like managing expectations, and that's kind of like one of the things that he was going through and saying, that I feel that the analogy was trying to get through is that they will nerf, and they will make negative changes, things that the players aren't going to like throughout the course of the game, because it is true, there are some things that have to be scaled back or throttled or whatever for the good of the longevity of the game. But yeah, probably spent a little bit too much time on the analogy, if anything.
But I think that's also part of the reason why I was kind of taken back by the conversation, because it made me realize that Rod, now mind you, Rod manages the Diablo franchise. He's not specifically working on Diablo 4. He's working on all, the entire Diablo franchise. But I don't feel like he understands why the player base isn't happy. It's not because we nerfed things. That stuff needed to change for the overall life of the game, and I think anyone who's played Diablo 4 at length understood that and understands that. There needed to be adjustments to the power level, the creep, the bugs that were just making things way out of proportion. And yeah, we know that there was, in his words, sugar that was supposed to attach with it to make it not feel as bad, right? But I think the problem is that like that's not the problem. The problem is that the well is dry. Your hardcore Diablo fans that play Diablo the way that people like us do, and a lot of the people that we converse with and probably listening to this podcast, that well has dried up for the most part. There's not really any new content. The seasonal theme.
I don't really agree, just because like that's not the question he was trying to answer.
Well, he was answering the question on, when do you read that, the player base is, what was the question again, Xanth?
So you're getting ahead to the vocal minority, and I think there's some conversation to be had there. This is more about like picking up on general player sentiment.
Right, and is the general player sentiment that the nerfs made them not play?
I mean, have you read Reddit?
I don't read Reddit. No.
Yeah.
I don't read Reddit. No.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of negative sentiments around that, the entirety of that first patch. That was,
I definitely
majority nerfs and stuff like that.
I get
so,
that.
I mean, they're definitely still going through and addressing like some of the things, that there was a huge amount of negative, feedback. Sentiment is the word of the day, from the community and such, about them going through and putting in huge nerfs, when people were expecting buffs.
Sure. I guess in my experience from like the people that I play with and what I've seen on Twitter, because I don't follow Reddit, but I'm much more active on Twitter. The sentiment that I've seen hasn't been anything really about the nerfs so much as it's been more about the content.
I mean, now, the conversation has evolved into that, but that, that you can't talk about how there were literally weeks of nothing but people going through and complaining about the
I
patch and
gotcha.
nerfs.
Well, that
Yeah.
makes more sense then. I guess for me, like it felt like we're still focused on the nerf being bad, and I felt like I mean, I guess I just was under the assumption that most of us had moved on from that at this point. So I guess that's my bad. We should have not moved on from that. But yeah,
Look, if there's any place to hold a grudge, it's the internet. Um,
fair.
but I think there was one, if we're talking about like Reddit latching points, it's that two-thirds analogy of having like we had two-thirds of the fix, so we went with it, and then we had to add the additional third later. Um, that was a sticking point of just saying, like, is what is going on, with development that they can view something like this of not having a full solution and just pushing it out because they want to do things. I think the analogy that Rod put out and using those kind of fractions makes it seem much worse than what it actually is. Like, oh, we had two-thirds of a fix, which means you didn't have a fix, right? Instead of saying like, no, we knew how to address these issues and we want to push them out. Unfortunately, we did not, um, compensate with, some sort of balance. Would at least sound better. But like when you say you didn't have a complete thing, it sounds way worse, right? Um, because they did have a complete thing. They had the complete way to try to fix these issues. They just didn't have the rebalancing, um, which I guess is semantics, but it just sounds worse when you put it in fractions. And that's why we don't talk in math, guys. We don't talk in math. Nobody wants to hear that. Um, and then that requires more analogies. It requires medicine and sugar. And you can't just eat ice cream. You got to have your salad too. And there are people out there that like salad. I'm not one of them. But
I love salad. Salad's
see,
great.
I think it's fucking gross.
I like ice cream better, but
Right.
I like salad. It's fine.
I don't mind salad, but my salads probably aren't that healthy with the amount of Italian dressing that I put on them.
That's
Let's
that a
see.
fair point. That is a fair
Yeah,
point.
I don't mind like a spinach salad, but like a iceberg lettuce, get the fuck out of here. What is that?
why not both?
Why? Yeah, why not
Ugh,
both?
ugh. Um, Not for me.
Oh god.
I like how so we've been doing this for well over a year now, and I've cursed like maybe three times on the show, and two of them were in reference to lettuce. So let that
True.
sink in. Like
True.
this, just like 2 seconds ago, just dropping F-bombs left and right over lettuce, because that's my strongest opinion on the show is lettuce based. Okay. So since we sit in this area, I felt like this question was very appropriate. The next question that follows, as we're talking about audience, sentiment, right, is how do you account for the vocal minority? And they said, like this is where we're going in. It's reviewing really well, but then you have streamers who are putting in a bunch of hours early on, and then are talking about how there isn't as much to do. Um, the running commentary early on with Diablo's was coming out is it's a game for dads. You ignore your wife and you play and you grind and everything's okay, but you can't play as much. So streamers are burning out and dads are going to take forever to get there. But we're now at the point that the dads have caught up, right? So all those complaints that they were hearing, and this is where it kind of gets interesting in this interview, that they bring up this vocal minority, and they do say, like these streamers saying that there isn't anything to do. I go back to good interviewing, right? They're talking to the lead of all Diablo, and they're reiterating these points that I'm sure they're aware of, but haven't really been said to their face of like people are saying there isn't anything to do in your game after this level. But they don't say that. They say it like, and the people are saying this, but they're also, most people aren't there. So it's not most people, it's this vocal minority. So it really felt more of like, hey, we'll call it a vocal minority, but at this point, a large amount are saying there isn't that much to do anymore. Um, Thoughts on that as we are the vocal minority?
Um, it's definitely it's one of those ones. I guess I picked up a little bit different from like how you just put it when I was going through and listening to that interview. You know, uh, but yeah, it definitely is one of those ones where they go through, and it's something that they also reiterate, or at least Rod goes through and reiterates later that they don't want to say vocal minority with like negative connotations to it because they realize that that is the hardcore gamers. Those are the influencers, people that have like direct feedback and influence on like how the game takes shape. Called them taste testers,
Tastemakers.
uh,
I thought that was
taste
interesting
makers.
too.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
the way that was described though, of like it was more like we don't want to upset them.
It felt like they realized they dismissed their most hardcore group and then had to walk it back a second.
Yeah. Like that felt like it was very interesting. Like, yeah, and you got your streamers and like influencers and tastemakers of like this is the group we need to court at all times to make sure that everything's staying relevant. Um, I just thought that was kind of interesting because, in all truth, not everybody out there who's streaming and playing Diablo has a vested interest in the franchise being successful. They have an interest in their content, right? And they will hop from game to game given the opportunity. So sometimes it has to be like herding cats if you're only caring about the influencers, um, or focused on them. But I digress. The vocal minority. Is the vocal minority still a minority, guys?
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, yes. Right.
Because
And sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, yeah, I would say yeah. It doesn't mean that we're wrong, but yeah, right. I mean, again, everyone.
Mhm.
I'm going to be completely blunt, honest, and this isn't a knock at Diablo 4. Again, I think the game's great, and I've gotten hundreds of hours out of it already. The only people I know playing the game right now are my friends that don't ever play and my girlfriend. All of my hardcore Diablo players are playing something else because that's just where we are. It's not that the game is necessarily dry for content because there is a lot of content between the Nightmare Sigils and the Hell Tides and the PvP zones, but they nerfed everything into oblivion so it doesn't feel good. And the rewards of those things, meaning you just have to do Nightmare Sigils, and man, does that get boring as hell. And I called this a year ago. That's exactly what I said was going to happen because the same thing happens with the Mythic Plus cycle in WoW as well. And so that's my whole perspective on this whole thing is that like the people that haven't dried up the well yet are the ones that are still playing. And those of us that are hardcore Diablo fans, we're still logging in just because we hope that something's there. But if they're looking at that telemetry, they're looking at that data, that's a misrepresentation of what I'm doing, right? So it's almost like I want to send the message of, no, there's nothing in here, so I'm not going to log in. But it's Diablo, right? So I have this like, addiction that I've got to feed every so often, dive into it. So for me, like, yes, there is a vocal minority. We are part of that vocal minority, boys. I would definitely say a part of it. But it doesn't mean that that it's wrong. And it also doesn't mean they need to cater just to us either, right? I mean, there's obviously still plenty of gameplay for the casual fans and the people that are out there. But, it's just the game is not finished. It's not finished. And even he kind of alluded to that, oh, we're going to keep adding this stuff and peppering this stuff in as we go. I keep getting ahead of the questions. I apologize for that. But I feel like it all ties together. I feel like he said the same thing in every single question and kind of came back to the same points a lot. So yeah, I think there's a vocal minority. I do think we're a part of it. And I think that all of the points he made are valid, but it didn't change it from feeling a little off-putting the way he said some of those things. And he being Rod, I want to be very clear. Chris Wilson at no point was condescending or anything like that at all. He seemed very, very sweet, even in the circumstance where he's being asked some pretty hard-hitting questions. Whereas Rod felt a little defensive and condescending in moments, for sure. And I like Rod a lot, so I say it with love.
As we know, you're the founding member of the Rod Ferguson fan club on this show.
Yep.
But I want to say that my sentiments largely are in line with what Nerdwords is putting down. I still have the world boss timer that I will log on just because even though I know nothing good is going to come from it, it's the most rewarding 5 minutes of gameplay that I will get. to go through and like log on, while playing like Armored Core or just spending time with the wife prepping for Warhammer tournaments and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, the only people that I know that are really still playing right now are, my wife. She's like caught up to me in levels. She's like, I think like 78 right now. And so it's a lot of the other like hardcore players they're playing Baldur's Gate or Armored Core. Though that's my little niche of friends. But yeah, it definitely is one of those things where it does feel as if it is, there's the vocal minority going through and asking for content. When if you were to talk to my wife, she absolutely loves the game, and she's
Yep.
playing the same exact build in season one as she was playing at the preseason. She's just enjoying it, and having fun, going through and smashing things as a giant bear. Um, but that, as they talk about in the interview itself, it isn't to dismiss the feelings and the gripes of the vocal minority, and as Nerdword said, kind of like jumping ahead to different parts of the interview itself, but they acknowledge that it is lacking content, but they have plans of adding additional stuff to the game. I believe, what was it, it's the beginning, not the end, and they'll continue to layer things in, that they've got a good content pipeline going through and coming.
Which we will end up talking about at the tail end of this episode. And I think you do bring up the point, and Rod goes into it, saying like, every other Diablo game didn't have an end game. We've launched with Nightmare Dungeons and Hell Tides, and um, like, hey, we have stuff. But that doesn't answer like it's not enough.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's
that
because the itemization in the other games was interesting enough to keep the grind interesting beyond the
Mhm.
content that existed in front of it.
right, right.
Those item level 63 weapons, man. I, I just gotta farm Act 4 so that way I can beat Act 2, so
There you
that way
go.
I can get to Act 4.
Yeah.
Just gotta go around
It's
kicking
funny
some
going back.
jars.
It's funny going back and like thinking about it that way, but it really was like one of the big things, especially like in the early days of vanilla Diablo 3, before, Reaper of Souls and such, that it was just farming for item level 63 yellows, and in some
Yeah.
cases blues, just because, a blue weapon will be better than anything else that you could get at that particular item level.
And farming
And
economy as well through the auctions.
yeah,
Yep.
that's also a very good point. And then after that, the monster power levels and trying to get to Paragon 100. Without that was a hell of a grind, but you did it for like the achievement. And even though that's still kind of, you get a lot more power out of getting to level 100 in Diablo 4 than you ever did with monster power, getting to Paragon 100 back then.
Absolutely.
But I guess it's just like I'm a different person,
Yeah.
than I was 10 years ago, 11, 12 years ago, 11
Year
years
old.
ago. Yeah.
Oh.
And so I don't I don't need to grind to level 100 just for the sake of the achievement. I don't plan on doing that. I have other things to do than just doing the grind for the sake of the grind. I do need a chase. And again, it's something that they kind of they address it in the interview, talking about like the Uber uniques. I'm jumping all over the place. I'm sorry, Xanth. Screw the order. But they
It's out
talked
the
about
window.
making it easier. And they talk about making it easier to farm like uniques and Uber uniques. And I'm very interested in seeing how that goes through and plays out, because
Yeah.
I mean, they don't. That's one of the issues. Your podcast listeners, I'm sorry, you're bored. We make this comment probably every episode, but they don't exist, and
Right.
so they're not a chase item. They need to exist so that way I bother actually spending time trying to look for it.
I think in general, if we're going to piggyback on grievances, there needs to be more unique items. Um, there just aren't enough to want to keep looking. Like you have a few sprinkled in, you seem to never get the one you want. If there was a larger pool, we just need more. We need like a little bit more. Um, where it feels less frustrating because there's one unique I want and I can't find it, and I'm not finding anything else either. Um, there just needs just a little bit more. Um, okay. I feel like this one's a fun one. The next question is battle passes. And in particular, do they work? Does a
Did we
game
skip
like
the
this,
question that brought up Baldur's Gate? Did we skip that question yet? Or are we
that
getting there?
comes at the end
Good. Okay.
of
Because
the
all right, just
interview.
making sure.
So,
Because they kind of tie together there.
yeah, so that is at the end. That is the last question. Um, but we get in particular, does the battle pass model work in this day and
I,
age? And I,
day and age. Yeah,
Right.
I loved the phrasing.
I did too. Yeah.
yeah, again, it's not. There's just really well written questions where it's not saying like, "Oh, your battle pass kind of sucks." It's, do you think this works? Like, is this something that you think you would go to? And I felt like the answer here was so surprising to me, and I'm curious to gauge your reaction, where they're just kind of saying, well, it's something that we're going to keep reevaluating. We've never done this before. It really felt like this isn't what we really like, or it's not working the way we wanted. But I did not get any sense of like, oh no, we're completely fine with the route that we've taken. We're going to keep pumping it out, and we're super happy. Like that was not the sentiment I got. Am I wrong?
No, I actually did appreciate the answer that they gave of they have one data point. It's like we haven't done this before. It's new to the Diablo 4 team and such. And we just have the one data point of season 1, and then with season 2 we'll have two data points that we can kind of evaluate and see things. Um but yeah, it definitely was one of those ones where it's like, because they even go through and they talked about, like with the battle pass, that the only thing that you can offer is cosmetics. Do you think that you're putting in enough to make it valuable, to people that people want to spend the money for? Which of course is, which is like you saying, just good very good games journalism, because that's been one of the biggest complaints, going back about cosmetics in the shop in Diablo 4 in general, is that a lot of the times it just doesn't feel worth it, whether it be the pricing or the content.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that they answered it as well as we could expect. The other thing to think about too, I just thought about this when you brought it up, Nine, is that they only have one data point, and that data point is skewed because a lot of us bought the premium edition of the game, which gave it to us for free, and then a lot of us it auto redeemed for us when we didn't necessarily want it to, which is a whole different thing.
Yeah, though I think that they probably would have that data on hand.
Yeah, I would
They
think
would, yeah,
so. Right. But if they're
yeah,
just looking at overall how many battle passes do we sell, right? Do those count
yeah.
versus not, things like that. So because again,
Just
like, sorry.
I was just saying, like, the whole free copy of the Reaper of Souls with the WoW subscription,
Right, right.
because they were like, this includes the 1.2 million copies that we sold for free, with the
Yeah.
WoW subscription thing.
So they
So I'm
can
pretty sure,
delineate, yeah.
yeah, I'm pretty sure it's something that they are well aware of. Don't they?
Right.
If Activision Blizzard's good at anything, it's money. Yeah.
Well, that's a whole different thing. But I think I find it hard to believe that in the middle of them being bought out, but that's a whole different thing. You're right, but also are we right? Right. So but I mean, like, just from my perspective, like, I hope that the data they get there is accurate to the actual player sentiment. Not to say that my sentiment is all player sentiment, but going in, man, I'm all for it. Throw stuff at me. I'm gonna give you money. I feel completely different today. I feel completely like I'm not getting the season pass for season 2. I'm not at all. Not even the little baby one. A message needs to get through that we paid premium price for a beta product. And while the game is very, very good, and I think that story-wise it's the best story they've ever told in Diablo, I think that is about it. And for me, like, again, like, I've gotten hundreds of hours, and I know this game is going to be a different game a year from now. It's going to be a different game when the first expansion drops. It's going to be a different game when season 15 hits, right? And that's the benefit of it being a live service. But I think the downside to it being a live service is that, we've gotten a product that I would say is not on par with the normal $70 box product you get on the shelf. Well, I say that. I guess the industry's been kind of letting us all down in a way, with the exception of a few games that have come out recently. But Yeah, I mean, I hope that the data they're getting is accurate and it really teaches them something to like. Not to say the battle pass can't work; it absolutely can. But this battle pass was not impactful. It wasn't worth the money for the battle pass, even for just the cosmetics piece. And even as a Diablo fan that wants to throw money at the Diablo team to continue development process of this game, I don't know that it was really worth it. And honestly, the cosmetics in the game are so good that I don't really feel like I need those cosmetics as well. So I think the question is super valid because, you can't put power in the pass because then that's going to create a pay to win. But if nothing in the pass is impactful, then why buy it, right? So it's like you got to strike a balance. So it's probably really tough for them to figure it out, but they're also trying to find a way to monetize our favorite IP. So I think it's a really delicate line they're walking. I think they're doing a pretty good job of that. They've just got to find the right footing. But I think that as it stands right now, Season 1 Battle Pass was a bit of a letdown. And I don't think that that's unfair to say.
No, and I think that's, Nineball, you brought it up, like that second data point. I would be very curious how many people will purchase that battle pass. They had their first experience. Um, it, they're going to have to roll out quite the red carpet and showcase all the rewards um, to entice somebody who's on the fence or to bring people back. Uh,
That's the
I,
big thing. It's
and
got to be
I,
good enough to bring people back
Yeah.
because
and I,
we've lost people for sure.
and I think that'll be interesting. Now, I've said it time and time again. Um, if you give me the ability to buy a different color fireball or to buy different color skeletons, I feel like changing skills is how you make money. In other words, you're right. Like those cosmetics in game, I don't care because
The sorcerer ones are terrible. Like they're so bad. They're so bad.
even if they
You don't
aren't, like
like male presenting nipples?
I prefer
I
it
mean,
honestly.
I'm okay with male presenting nipples. Honestly, it's more like there's just it's such a mixed bag, and there's some really cool transmogs, but not for my class. And I'm not buying a rogue transmog. What the fuck I look like? No, I'm good.
But even with some cooler looking sets out there, it doesn't impact me that much.
Yeah,
But I'm always going to be using, werebear. I'm always going to be using
right.
fireball. And
I feel like that's going to take significantly more iteration, though.
probably, but as we did here, there are four different teams working on Diablo
Well,
right now.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
we're not to that part of the question right yet because like
Right.
that I got some that's I have feelings. But yeah, I think
One of
that
them could be a
you're absolutely.
multicolored fireball team.
There you go, right? Could I
Yeah.
get a red lightning bolt? That would be sick, right? Just something simple like that. But I don't think that that's very simple to code. It probably takes a lot more effort. But I think it would be worth it. I would consider paying for that over like, dressing up my Barbie doll in Diablo. Because the in-game cosmetics are really good, and I think they nailed it with that. I think that the premium cosmetics just aren't good enough. If they were cheaper priced and a little better, I'd be into it. But they're so I could go buy my kid an actual real life set of clothes for the amount of money that I can dress up my Diablo Barbie. So
Mhm.
until that makes a little more sense fiscally, here we are.
Yeah. As I've said before, yeah, definitely the prices are too high. You're not, and it's like the transmogs aren't cool enough to make me want to purchase them. And the only ones that I've bought are like the cheap ones, because
Yeah.
I liked that particular look or something like that. But nothing in the big packages has really enticed me all that much, especially at the price points that they are. And this is someone
Yeah.
that on day one I bought the $100 platinum package, and I still just have
All that platinum
friggin' what
chilling.
is it? Yeah, I just have like $80 worth of platinum just chilling on my account. Not doing anything because it's kind of like it's free money. It doesn't cost me anything, but I don't. No, I'm
Yeah.
good.
Well,
Yeah, so
I think all the cosmetics as $5 or $10 cosmetics are fine, but as 20 and
yeah,
$25 cosmetics is insane.
or yeah, that one's just especially, and then like going back into the battle pass, like you buy the premium battle pass and you don't even get enough platinum back to purchase anything.
Yeah.
Like there
It's
definitely
just
should be there should be a reevaluation there of either how much they're giving you or how much things in the shop cost, because there should be something in the shop that you can purchase with a 666 platinum or they need to drop the meme and push it to 800 so that way you can buy a
A battle
simple
pass
cosmetic.
or
You
the
know,
battle. I mean,
or yeah, or the ideal situation would be making it so that way you earn $10 worth of platinum and you can just buy the next battle pass if you so choose.
free to
You
play
know, and
games do
hope,
that. Why can't Diablo, which has a box price, right? Like
yeah,
that's Call of Duty does that, right? Like that's
yeah,
another Activision game, just for comparison's sake. And
yeah,
Diablo doesn't, and that's mind blowing to me.
I fully agree.
Or a
And
token for a class set, you know?
Yeah, any sort
yeah,
of like reward.
but I just want to add that I would completely go all in on like spell cosmetics as well. You
Yeah,
know,
I
just
would
being able
too.
to go
That's
through,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
From the Path of Exile perspective, I've supported the game for years. I bought a few passes for a few leagues, and I still have a good amount of, I forget what the currency is, but almost all the currency that I've spent has not been on armors or anything. It has been on, I've been really loving this skill. There is a cosmetic for it that looks pretty cool. I think I'll just buy that. And then I enjoy the skill even more. And then the next league, what's the skill that I'm playing then? Is there a cosmetic? Oh, I like that one. That would be kind of cool. And I buy that. Like almost all of my currency outside of buying a few stash tabs has been spent on that because like one, it came with the supporter packs. So I've got it sitting there and it makes the experience more enjoyable. It changes it up a little bit. Um, that seems like a logical thing for Diablo. Like, give me, again, a different kind of werebear. Like, Druid cosmetics have no effect for me because I'm going to be in bear or wolf the whole time. Let me be a different kind, and you will get some cash from me. Now, we're devolving. We have moved past this GameSpot interview. Um, but it was kind of interesting to hear their perspectives on that. Um, let's talk about expectations. Uh, So, do you think there is a different type of expectation on a Blizzard team? Again, like these interviewers.
Great questions. Great questions. And the fact that they came from GameSpot again blew my mind out of my ear. But great questions. Not meaning to
And
be a shot at GameSpot, but it kind of is.
and well, I think, and we said it just a little bit on the top end, like games journalism, I think could be really amazing. Like the gaming industry in and of itself is massive, but like when it comes to like journalists actually asking questions and digging into things, when you see a real news story come out about a game, it's mind-blowing because it just doesn't happen. Most games websites, what are the ads that run on them? Well, they're for games.
Yep.
How do they get any sort of access? It's through promotion. They're just another avenue for companies to promote a game. So when you have journalists actually doing the journalist part, it really does feel refreshing. And I think it is something that's definitely warranted. Now, there's a difference between needing a hard-hitting interview, um, and doing, your basic kind of fluff pieces. That's fine.
Right.
But if we had more stuff like this, I think it would just be great. And I do think that maybe they felt like they could do this with Diablo because it is on a little bit of a downturn, right?
Sure.
Like it might have been an easier target where they may not have hit out at, somebody who's on the
I
upswing.
still don't think Rod or Chris were expecting it as much.
I don't think so either. I don't think that that is what they were going for. Um, but we do have this question about expectations, right? Um, which, it just kind of goes back to like the success of Diablo 4 right now of saying, do you think you should be held to a different standard? Um, and I felt like Rod's answer really didn't help it. Um, to be like, well, most of our team has never shipped a game before, so I think we probably deserve some credit for that, right? Like it's just a bunch of people who don't know what they're doing. Like I don't know, man. Maybe
He
don't throw the
also
team under the
went into the
bus.
year of the RPG as well, right? Talking about all the great games that have come out, which I did think was a good nod, but also a very typical game dev answer on a hard question to just deflect and go straight to, well, but this game's so great and this game's so great, and it feels like it's the year of the RPG, which just completely derails the question a little bit. But yes, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And so the two moments out of this interview that have really been picked up on are this one, and then obviously going back to that two-thirds solution. Um, the general consensus kind of being that it felt like Rod was throwing the team under the bus and saying that the standards should generally be lower. Yeah, I don't. Thoughts, guys?
9, I'll let you go first on this one.
Yeah, I guess I yeah, no. It's definitely one of those things where he's trying to find kind of like the political answer with which to go through and give, because like yes, it is Blizzard. They are held to a higher standard when it comes to going through and releasing games. That just look at the vocal minority of the community sentiment, if I can hit all of the buzzwords, of everybody is just like they just expect more from Blizzard because it's Blizzard. But at the same time, when Blizzard ever misses the mark, they are, they're they're held for it, So everyone is always constantly talking about, oh, Blizzard's been in the decline, don't expect anything, good from them. But at the same time, people will be like, oh, you're Blizzard, you should do better. Which is always a interesting kind of paradox to me. But yeah, I mean, it is Blizzard. They've got huge budgets and really they're really big, like star talent that's on those teams. Um, you know, so it did kind of feel a little bit of going through and deflecting a little bit. It's our first time. All this other types of stuff, and it's like like, just kind of have to own it. Miss the mark.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I think too, right? Like they could have very easily answered this question very directly and come out unscathed and looking great here. And I think that the way they answered it just made it a little worse. Again, that's why I felt like they weren't prepared for that question. He backpedaled a bit, got a little defensive, and he was like, "Well, but it's we were having the community, the developer thing, and I said, hey, raise your hand if it's your first game launch, and there were a lot of hands, right? And it's like, even if that's true, one, don't give that to the internet. That's just don't give that to the internet. Here's what I will tell you, especially as someone who is a manager, and Nineball, you're a manager, right? New people is good. That's a really good thing to have people launching a game, and to have that many new developers, quote unquote. I don't know how many, obviously, but on Diablo 4, and how good the game is, because it is a good game. Like, don't get it twisted. The game is a great game. It just doesn't have the legs that the other Diablo games in the franchise had, because it's more catered towards a casual audience, and that's okay too, right? At the end of the day, it is held to a higher standard. But it's not held to the higher standard because of Blizzard, because I hate to break it to everybody, but Blizzard isn't the same Blizzard and hasn't been for a long time. None of those people are really there anymore. And half of them were douchebags anyways. So, like, it's a good thing that it's not the same company anymore. The quality in the games, you can feel how you want to feel about that. Personally, I've loved Diablo 4. I really enjoyed Diablo 3. Diablo 2 is one of the games I've put the most hours in my entire life. And, of course, Diablo 1. I love all the StarCraft games. I mean, Dragonflight from World of Warcraft has been a fantastic expansion. So to say that they can't put out quality because they're not that original Blizzard group is insane. It's good that they're bringing in new people into the pipeline and new development. And look, after COVID, everyone's got turnover, right? So game development is not anywhere shy of that. That said, they are held to a higher standard, and they're held to a higher standard because of their budget, because they're sponsored by Activision, and because of the pay model and pay structure of this game. This question came up because they directly asked about Baldur's Gate. Baldur's Gate is being praised for being a game that was launched in early access and publicly facing iteration over years and years and years and years, and they're being praised for it, while at the same time Diablo is being knocked for the same thing. But that in of itself is the problem. Diablo was launched as a game, not as early access. I paid $120 for that game, not in early access. They had, what is it? I was just looking at the numbers on this. 9,167 people were credited in the making of Diablo 4. 2,464 people were in audio related roles. So let's take the 2,400 people out. So you're talking about 6,000 plus people that worked on this game. Larian Studios is a studio of 450 people, roughly. So team size, team production quality, and they're very different games as well too. And I'm sure one is a little harder to manage and make than the other. And I don't know which one's which. I'm not a game developer. But when you are Activision Blizzard, right? When you make games like Call of Duty and you annualize them, when you put out a battle pass for a game, and it does the things like the instant, there's just so many little things that have gone wrong since the launch. I think the launch was fantastic, but since that launch, there has been just mishandling of different things that have caused the sentiment. It didn't happen at one time. It didn't happen because of one thing, and it didn't happen because there's no content. There actually is content. It's just not interesting enough to keep hardcore Diablo fans playing the way that we played Diablo 3 and Diablo 2, even with very worse versions of the game. Diablo 3 Vanilla and Diablo 2 Vanilla were not as good as Diablo 4 Vanilla. But there was something there that kept us going after it despite the flaws. Diablo 4, honestly, like it's hard to go back to it sometimes because like there's just not a point in a lot of the things that you once you've checked the boxes and done the things you want to do, I think. But I think that there's this misunderstanding of like Blizzard's this big thing. It should always be doing these great games. I think that stigma has not necessarily died. It's still there, but I think it should die. They're a game company and human beings like everybody else. But I think that the problem is that isn't it that they're Blizzard? It's the time and the iteration and the cost and the pay structure. If I paid $120 for Baldur's Gate and it had a battle pass and we had the same problems that we had, I'd be saying the same thing about Baldur's Gate. But that's not a problem. You know, that's not a problem with that game. It's not a problem with these other games that we've jumped into and out of. But again, I do think the other part of the problem is it is a really good year for games. There's just a lot of really great games out, and Diablo 4 hit some really great notes and fell short in some others. And they're going to make it better. Again, you know, Diablo 2, Diablo 3 saw the same thing when it launched, and it got drastically better over the years. It's just that Diablo 4 being launched with that in mind. I said it back a year ago too, right? That they're talking about seasons before the game is out, and that scares me. Well, here we are, and this is why, right? We're more worried about the seasonal content than fixing the game before we dive into that seasonal content. I think that we should have waited till the first of the year before we saw any seasonal content to give us time to iterate on the game and to really fix the things that are broken, like the different powers and bug fixes that needed to be done, because then we wouldn't be worried about the seasonal structure. We'd be worried about just playing the game and continuing to grind the content. I was thinking about it the other day. Diablo 2 and Diablo 3, right? Like, we've run through those campaigns dozens and dozens and dozens of times just through playing the game. Diablo 4, I mean, unless you're like me or 9 and just love the story and want to do it, you're probably never going to touch the story again. So none of those characters and moments are going to be as memorable as even Diablo 3 or Diablo 2, and definitely Diablo 1, you know? So, like, I get joy out of just going back and playing the story and doing more side quests and doing those again and exploring the areas. But for your hardcore Diablo 2 fan who didn't give a shit about the story, which is a vast majority of the player base, it's kind of insane how much.
It's funny because like all the people still playing Diablo 2 right now are the ones that don't give a shit about the story.
Yeah, exactly right. So, you know, it's just a matter of like, I don't think it's about Blizzard. I think it's about the time, the production quality, and just the budget behind the game more than it is Blizzard. But either way, his answer to the question was equal parts. Thank you for giving nods to really great games, because he mentioned Final Fantasy 16, he mentioned Baldur's Gate, I think he mentioned Starfield as well. He mentioned some great games, which showed. I like it when companies give kudos to other companies, right? I think that's really healthy for the game industry. Any game that's successful, rising tide lifts all ships type mentality, I think is great. But I really think that Rod. And maybe it's the development team as a whole, but definitely Rod does not fully understand what the problem with Diablo 4 is, and that's the fear that I have.
Nine ball.
You want me to go again?
I'm seeing if there's a rebuttal in there. No, I think you did hit on a lot of things, and in bringing up the seasonal content, kind of coming back to that. we're in September. We know next month we're going to get some news about what the season entails. We know the next season will start next month. Um, but I think you have a very good point there, in your words, that the next season will bring new things, but if the core parts aren't adjusted, then we'll burn through those new things so
In a week,
quickly.
just like Diablo
You know,
3.
yeah.
Yep.
And I think, I liked your point about that chase. Um, I can't count the amount of times that I've ran Diablo 2. How many cow runs have I done in my
Right.
life, you know?
How many times have you killed Bale
Uh,
and Diablo, right? Just alone, just those two.
Right,
Or Mephisto.
or yeah, bail runs or stuff like that. And
Which isn't
yet,
fun or engaging gameplay, by the way. I'm not at all saying that that's what we need to go back to, but just that we did it a
no,
lot.
no, it absolutely isn't, running around a rectangle killing cows. But honestly, to this day, killing a field of cows still brings joy. That
Still
is
feels
still
great.
fun.
Still feels great. It does.
yeah.
It that I don't think that can get old. But, going through, there was always a purpose. Like, I want to find this. I know by doing it, I can get that. And if I get that, then I can
Tradable
do
economy.
this.
Tradable
It
Yeah.
economy.
ruins, just runes in general. Like that, I saw a great post the other day on Reddit. You should really get on it, or you might like it.
Apparently
Don't
so.
do it.
Apparently,
Don't do
apparently.
it.
Well, earlier you referenced that Twitch wasn't the metric, right? But you were referencing a Twitch metric that was posted on Reddit, so that
I know.
implied that Reddit is the metric and that Twitch is just the
No,
subsidiary.
Reddit is just the thing I read. Um,
That's fair.
but
Apparently, I need to.
eventually, what
Reddit.
happens with all gaming communities is, Diablo got really popular. Lots of people came in, then they soured, lots of vitriol, and eventually that vitriol fades because people will go and complain on other forums about the
Yeah.
game that they hate now. And then sometimes people actually who are still involved in the community will post like ideas. And I saw a decent write-up of like how to integrate runes into Diablo 4. And all I could think was, I would love to just have that one thing I'm trying to find. And I know by making a combination, I could make it, and then that could lead to other things. That's the part for me that's missing from Diablo 4 is right now I'm searching for one unique item that is the cornerstone to my build. And I don't know if I'm ever going to find it, or if I do find it, it might be too late, as opposed to having small incremental changes and incremental things that I can find throughout that are going to keep me going.
See, I
Small
think I
rewards.
think it also comes back to Diablo 3. And again, I played a lot. I mean, I've got I think 4 or 5 thousand hours in Diablo 3, right? I played the hell out of that game. And I'm going to play Season 29 when it drops too, because it looks really cool. It looks fun. I'm going to
Yeah.
play it. Because again, I'll finish it in a weekend probably, but when I'm done, I'm done. But it's the same problem that Diablo 3 had with Primals. It's that I'm not grinding for anything except for what I already have, but a little better.
Little better.
And
Mm.
that doesn't feel like a good ROI on my time, right? I could play for 8 hours and find nothing that's impactful to me or my economy. Whereas Diablo 2, Path of Exile, these other games that have less systems have a more open economy. So that even if you're not getting stuff that is good for you, you can build up an economy to make it good for you through trades. And I'm not one who even likes the trading system. In fact, you can go back to listen to other podcasts where I talk about how, like, I don't want there to be trading in a lot of regards. But with Diablo 4, like, if they just made it to where aspects and or legendaries, not even uniques, keep them locked, whatever, but just legendaries and legendary aspects, if those were tradable, I would have more of a reason to sign in and play, because finding those good legendary aspects to get more gold, to build more economy, to get to 10 billion gold if I wanted to, I mean, that's at least something to do. And I would probably do it because I'm insane. But having 400,000 or 500,000 gold is already like, why do I need any more? I've got my gear. It's rolled as good as it's going to be. I'm not going to spend 15 million per roll on this amulet now. So I've moved on from making that a little bit better. And so now I'm just, if I'm playing to challenge myself. But if I beat Uber Lilith and I've done the Nightmare Sigil 100 and I don't enjoy Nightmare Sigils in general, okay, I'll go do PvP, but everything's 5 levels lower. The other thing they can do is just honestly make the PvP zone back to like your level. That would be awesome. Just do that, and I would probably play a lot more again. Because I really miss the PvP. It was fun, even though Barbs and Rogues are busted out there. It's still fun.
Okay,
But yeah,
so
I don't. Yeah, it's
we're
tough.
doing too much admiring the problem, which could be its own podcast. Um,
Sure.
so from there, the last question, we go into just is, Baldur's Gate. Uh, is it a live service game? How do you deal with these two different narratives? Um, there has been some logical comparisons of Baldur's Gate and Diablo. Really, the general comparison being more of how refreshing, Larian, it has been to produce a game that is not going to ask for more money after it was created, right? You paid for it, enjoy it. We'll put out some new patches. We're going to keep working on it, but for the most part, hey, we're done, right? No more money. Um, I like what you mentioned before, in other words, other studios celebrating each other's success. Always cool. This feels like a bait question,
A little bit.
like they were successful. Why did you guys choose this? Uh,
Yeah, a little bit.
like
A little bit.
I would argue this is the worst question that they ask because it isn't really asking a
Man,
question.
see, I thought it was a really good question because I thought it was a chance for Diablo, the Diablo team, and specifically Rod, to give the right answer.
But it comes at you can ask. I feel like you ask this question, but you don't include Baldur's Gate in it. Um, because it's an us versus them kind of thing, right? Where it's just more of like you launched a live service game. Um, do you think the game itself warrants that? And you don't have to do the current like pit it against Baldur's Gate.
Sure.
Because then they kind of also have to tiptoe around not insulting Baldur's Gate 2. Um, or I should say Baldur's Gate 3, but I was saying TOO, but I digress.
As well, as well.
Right. Uh, so I feel like it's just a poorly worded one, but the sentiment is there. This is a live service. Why? Why? Thoughts?
I mean, for me, it's because it's two games of very different goals and outcomes.
Yeah.
Even though they're both like RPGs, Baldur's Gate is entirely about the journey. It's about playing through the campaign, the story, and having the freedom to change things up however you see fit. Like that. That's the type of thing that you have with the Dungeons and Dragons adventure. That like is the point, is replaying the content different ways in order to get like different outcomes, to try different things. Whereas, Diablo is, I guess technically is about the journey as well, but it's just about the grind, getting to end game, grinding out, spending countless hours trying to farm that one thing that you'll never find, with the caveat that it does actually exist, not like the uber uniques that we have in Diablo 4. But it's very two very different styles of gameplay, because if you take, like, it'd be basically like asking if you took Diablo 4 and all of the development time that they put into developing Nightmare Dungeons and Hell Tides and all the other, kind of like the in-game activities and such, and then refocus all of that into creating branching narratives within the campaign. Would be like a better comparison between like the two games, but like they have like such incredibly different goals, in mind with the player experience, in regards to the player experience, that it's like, why don't just compare it to Solitaire or, Minesweeper or something like that.
I don't know if I agree with that, but that's all of your point up to that point was really good. I don't know if I agree with that. I would. So they are very different games. They're very different games. I would say both very, dark gothic D&D inspired RPGs, but one is very turn based, story driven, whereas Diablo 4, while I love the story and Nightfall loves the story, for most people is not what you would consider a story driven game.
No.
Though the story is so good, it's so good. The side quest, the world is so good. I don't feel like it's leveraged nearly as much as it could or should be, and I don't have the answer to that. But
But it was designed to be a very small percentage of your
right,
overall playing
right,
experience.
exactly. And I think that the difference is one was launched as a live service and one was not. Baldur's Gate is a box game, start to
Yeah.
finish, a product. Diablo 4 is a live service. Diablo 4 is more akin to World of Warcraft than Diablo 2. and that's
Yeah.
the truth. And that's what like I've been saying for a long time on the podcast that we've all been saying, and our expectations should change. Now, that said, if World of Warcraft launched with only open world PvP and only Mythic plus dungeons, I'm pretty sure the WoW base wouldn't be very happy with that either, right? Um, there's more content to be farmed there that will be farmed over time. But we have to learn what that's going to look like, and I really feel like it's going to lead to some innovations of the space that are really impactful down the road. The problem is we all paid for this game in June, right? So that's really it. Whereas Baldur's Gate 3 years ago launched in early access, you could pay for the full game, but you paid $60. You got the full game at launch as well, and they announced that it was early access and they were going to iterate on it. But here's the big difference: Larian Studios doesn't have shareholders. Activision does. There are other hands in the jar other than game devs just making money. Now, mind you, I'm sure that obviously making money is the point of a business. You have to make money to have a business. But even playing Baldur's Gate versus Diablo 4, and again, a fan of both games in a big way, Baldur's Gate feels like a labor of love, and Diablo 4 did, but in moments loses that feeling, I think, too. You know? And part of that is just a bigger company with more people, more hands, more it goes through more desks and inboxes than Baldur's does. But again, I think that Nine is absolutely right. They're very different games, and it's difficult to compare the two. And they have different visions for their end game and what that's going to be. And honestly, Baldur's Gate came after Diablo 4 enough to be able to kind of take shots at different things like the battle pass and the store and the microtransactions and stuff that really put them at an advantage in that regard, because they could kind of see what was happening and make adjustments on that. But I think, again, that at the end of the day, both products are very good, and Diablo fans are rabid. We are rabid folk who love our Diablo games and want to play them endlessly. And we want to play more Diablo 4. It all comes from a labor of love of us just wanting to get back into Sanctuary and do what we want to go do. And right now, there just doesn't feel like there's a great ROI for that. And I think that's what it boils down to. But I think that the biggest difference between Activision and Larian is the studios and how they operate from the top down. And it says a lot about the development and the products they put out because of it.
For anybody who's confused on that acronym, I believe it's return on investment. So ROI, return on investment.
Sorry, sorry.
Just in case. I mean, if somebody's out there
Didn't
and like
didn't feel like I needed to
ROI,
explain that. Yeah, sorry, my bad.
what
Return
is
on
that?
investment, my bad.
Hypothetically, if they were curious, I'm
And by
saying
the
it
way,
because I had to think about it. I was like ROI. Oh, yeah. Okay.
well, and I'll tell you this, just as to give you a story, not to and again, not to harp on Baldur's Gate. This is not a Baldur's Gate podcast, but it is a very good game and very. If you're a Diablo fan, I recommend giving it a shot. It's worth it. It's worth a shot. It's if you're a D&D fan, a dungeon crawler fan, a Gothic RPG fan, it's really good. But what I would say is this: is that with Baldur's Gate, the biggest thing with it is like it just feels like I put 130 hours, I think, into my first playthrough and a half because I played like a little bit through and then stopped and started over. And as soon as I finished the game, I started a new game. There's no end game content. There's no raids or PvP or online at all. There's co-op with buddies, and that's about it. There's no like any sort of anything else there. But the content is so rich in that game that I mean, how many RPGs have you put over 100 hours into, beat it pretty completely, not complete, but pretty completely, and then went immediately, okay, I know what I want to do with my next playthrough, I know what I want to make, I know what I want my party composition to be, and I'm going to go do that right now. And I put another 20, 30 hours in right away, and then Starfield came out, and I jumped to that and back to Diablo 4 for a bit. So that I feel like that's a powerful statement, and that's how I was with Diablo 2. That's how I was with Diablo 3. I beat the game, I got to end game, right, or end game. I beat Hell difficulty in Diablo 2. I beat Inferno on Diablo 3. And what did I do? I either started that process again or started grinding for economy. And I haven't felt that in Diablo 4, right? For whatever the reason is, again, I'm not a developer. I don't have the answers to everything. I feel like it has a lot to do with the economy. But for me, that's the difference. It's that that pull to go back and play right away. And I just haven't had that as much with Diablo right now. And I'm hoping season 2 does it, but I'll be honest with you, we're gonna get there. Actually, I'll just save that for that. But yeah,
Well, I think we are there. So this interview concludes, and they all go on their merry way. But we did get some more information about, as we're talking, the future. Um, and that expansions are coming, and they're coming a lot faster than what we might expect. That essentially we can expect yearly Diablo expansions. Now, there's a lot to talk about here, and I don't want to go too long tonight, but um, the thing that came to my mind is that the word expansion is changing, and it's not Lord of Destruction. It's not Reaper of Souls. What Path of Exile does is they do 4 leagues a year. 3 of them are smaller, and one of them is bigger, essentially an expansion, adding on a new act, adding on a new map mechanic or a new, whatever else it might be. That this is your cornerstone. This is the end of year expansion um, to the game. That's the first thought I had when I saw yearly expansions, is it's not this game. It's not to say that Path of Exile's bigger expansions haven't changed the game. There's been some massive ones. At one point they added 5 new acts, um, which was phenomenal. But when we think about the transition between Diablo games and expansions, it's massive. Lord of Destruction cements Diablo 2 as being one of the best games of all time. Reaper of Souls completely shifts the narrative of what Diablo 3 is. And I think there's a general hope that Diablo 4's expansion could do the exact same thing. But this to me just doesn't feel like it would be, but I'm willing to be wrong. Please let me be wrong. So what were your thoughts as you ventured in hearing that news about expansions?
Well, two things. As you went through and you mentioned, it does kind of give uh, a feeling that the definition of what an expansion is going to entail changes. Because like you mentioned, think about all the stuff that you loved in Diablo 2, runes, charms. I mean, the skill synergies came later. It wasn't like an expansion feature, but like some of those like very clearly defined aspects that you remember about the game were Lord of Destruction, not classic D2. Diablo 3 added adventure mode and rifts, right out the gate with Reaper of Souls. So expansions in Diablo have always been really big, world-changing, features that get added in. And if they're going to be coming at us yearly, I don't see how they'd be able to keep up with that level of cadence in kind of like the expectations that goes around that. I'm okay with like looking at the content at a yearly level, like putting in the expansion, like you were mentioning, like Path of Exile, putting in the expansion and then all of the subsequent seasons, in that year together with it to kind of like look at what we got as a whole. But at the same time, I would be I'd be remiss if I was to say that I'd be happy to have an expansion every year if it's just a new zone and a new class, or one of the above. I'd be expecting, I like my expectation for like the first expansion would be like runes. It was something that they had talked about bringing into the base game. It's something that they say that they're still going through, working and iterating on. But how many of these big features, are they going to be able to like work on and develop on a yearly basis while still putting out a season every 3 months in all the other balance changes, tuning, and then also the idea that okay, so in addition to the base game in the season passes, that I'm now going to be paying how much for an expansion every year to then continue to get it. And so now it's beginning to feel a bit more monetized than previous iterations of the game. Um, you know, which if you're delivering big on the content, if you're making my dollar value feel good, that's great. But the just kind of like I just don't see, especially at the level that we went through. We had the game launch, we had the season one, and when we have the season two, and the amount of content that we're getting, in those initial seasons, and then you know 9 months from now we're going to be getting an expansion, and that's while you're working on all these other things, like how much are you cutting out of the seasons to put into the expansion, or what is being broken out of the expansion to put into seasons, and I don't know. It's a lot of questions, and I think it is partially because the faith has been shaken a little bit, with how the launch and the season one have all happened, with the game, that I'm hesitant. I can't be happy and super optimistic that, hey, we're getting annual expansions, that I would have been, if you had told me 6 months ago we're going to get annual expansions, I would have been, oh, that's freaking great, that sounds awesome, that's cool. But now we have, um we I've only got one data point to go off of, to bring back a saying that, and it, I don't know, it does not spark immediate joy.
I could not agree more. I feel almost identically. So rather than just harping on the same point, I will say this: just honestly, pause seasons until season three. Like, don't do another season. Stop what you're doing. Collectively gather your teams and efforts, fix the things broken with the game, and have a banger of a season two that starts in January. I think that would be the answer, and then that might restore some of the faith in the expansions. But exactly what Nineball said, Activision has another annualized title. It's called Call of Duty, and it's not great. It also has battle passes that give you a free fucking battle pass every time you finish it too. So there's that. But I completely agree. Completely agree. It's hard to feel excited about it until I have a little more context. And it's a little frustrating to know that the team is split up. He even mentioned it in the interview where he said that, there's a lack of understanding of how much, I forget the wording he used, but basically saying that, like, by having separate teams do this, we're not actually hindering our iteration process at all, is essentially what he's getting to. Like, having an expansion team, they couldn't help with the season team anyway. We've got that fleshed out, right? But it still doesn't feel great that we know that that's happening when things are where they are right now. So yeah, I completely agree. Completely agree.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot to be in. That if we were to travel back in time and take a listen to an episode from May or April, and to have no idea about expansions, and to feel so differently. Um, One of the other bits that did come out, and it wasn't in the GameSpot interview, but it did come up in various other Gamescom pieces, was that there isn't any plans at the moment for a PTR for Diablo 4, which
Yeah.
still, we in Nine Ball, we talked last time, we brought up there are some major things that they're going to be changing in the next season with resistances and stuff like that, that it just feels like having people test it that aren't in-house, having public sentiment seems like a good idea. And
You
I'm
need a
fully
wider spread of a player base playing it. You need that. And so
right.
many things would have been fixed by having a PTR. Even a 2 week PTR would be so impactful to the design process. There's no way it wouldn't be.
And it's nothing like there's a common criticism of like, Diablo devs don't play their game, yada yada yada, and we know that's not true. But I think it's different when you put someone like, Macro Bio Boy on a PTR, streaming and just going nuts, and the
Just doing
feedback that
science
you
homework
get,
for fun.
right?
Yeah.
It's different. And the things that will get caught and the game will be much better for it. And I hope that it's something that they turn around. I understand, some of it comes from wanting to keep your cards close to the chest, not reveal too much. But I'm with you, Nerdbirds. We rushed to season one too quickly because it was quote unquote ready before, before launch. And the danger in hearing about these expansions, right, is that there's always going to be a major chunk of the game that's kind of left behind because we need to fix or finish season two. All right. Well, we understand there's this core part of the game that we want to work on, but you know what? This new mechanic we introduced is bugging out. So we need to fix that first. And then we
Yeah.
need to fix this. And then we need to fix this. And oh, we got an expansion coming in 6 months. Oh, we got another season. And if the timeline starts moving too quickly, Diablo 4 doesn't get into the state that we want it to be in.
Right.
It just gets into a state of continual updates to a product that isn't quite there yet.
Well, and he mentioned that. I forget which question he mentioned that in, but he mentioned, this is a live service game, and like we've got these things in the pipeline that are going to come down, but we got to figure out where we want to, do we want to get off at this train station or this one, right? And
Yeah.
I hated that analogy. It was impactful to me, but I hated it, right? Like I understood what he's getting at, but that was my problem with the idea of Diablo 4 being a live service, like a World of Warcraft, as opposed to traditional Diablo games, is that like even in the interview with GameSpot, he said that what was it that Diablo 4 or Diablo 3 to Diablo 4 is 11 years, and that didn't live up to our community's expectations or whatever what they deserve, and that the current schedule of seasons and annualized expansions is to make up for that. It's like, yo, dude, like if anyone that's a huge fan of Diablo and has been for 20, 30 years, even 5 years, even a year, told you that, yeah, we just want more. I don't think anyone is saying that. We just want quality over more. You've got a great base for the game. If you can fix some of these little things and focus time into that, like, man, we could have such a better product for everyone, I think. It's not even about the end game systems. Game as is, just with some little things tweaked and fixed to make it a little more impactful to our gameplay experience would be huge. Again, my fear is that the leadership, either at the top end of Activision or the management of the Diablo franchise, does not understand what the player base wants. And hell, maybe the other problem is that us hardcore people, maybe that's just not for us. Maybe that's the case too.
See, I've wondered that, that obviously we're super passionate. We are, the creators of Trinidad and Tobago's #4 gaming podcast.
I love that stat. Oh God,
Thank you, Chartable, for giving me this kind of information because I need that in my life.
that's
Um,
great.
but like, are we disconnected? And
Right,
I don't,
right.
I don't think that we are, though. Um, I think that the general sentiment that we feel, as I alluded to earlier on, like some people got to this point way faster, right?
Yeah,
Your
Mhm.
streamers, your taste makers, they got there sooner because they consumed it all very quickly. And then
sure.
your dads with their dad
A-
lives and
am
kids,
dad.
yeah,
Am dad.
well, you know, you're a freak of nature. Um,
Thank
they took
you.
longer to get there, but I think they're there now too.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't think we're out of touch. I don't think that sentiment is genuinely, I don't want to say bad, because like I don't think Diablo 4 is a bad game. It just
Not at
Yeah.
all.
it has that section missing. And I don't think Diablo 4 gets reviewed as well as it does in the onset if it was a
Right.
bad game. Diablo 4 is at the time reviewed higher than as you're playing right now, in other words, Starfield, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
it's just the legs that it has aren't enough to carry it as here we are, September 5th, right? Just not enough yet. So I think
I think
that
it can
that'll
get
be
there easily though.
right.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've said time and time again here is that the base of the game works. If it didn't,
Hmm.
playing through the campaign would have been a slog and it would have sucked.
Right.
That hasn't been the sentiment at all. Um,
Yeah.
so it has all
Well, not
those
for us.
pieces.
There are some people that were not happy with the campaign, but honestly,
Right. Yeah,
that's
but
fine. Just that
you're not going to
move
make
on.
everybody.
Go back to playing something else. It's fine.
Right. But, you know, I think as hardcore fans, obviously we're going to still have our worries and fears of it kind of
Yeah.
moving forward. Um, we've seen like two major moves that I thought were very surprising already. We had an XP weekend, XP and Gold weekend, which we talked at the top end, and then we saw Diablo 4 was on sale. 3 months after release was on sale.
That's Activision, dude. That's what they do.
I know, but I
Yeah,
was so
that
surprised by
Call
that.
of Duty is going to come out October 20th, or was it November 10th? And by Black Friday, it'll be $25, brand new. Does it
and
every
you
year.
definitely and you can't and you know in Call of Duty it's the same reviews all the time.
Right.
It's for the Call of Duty players. They literally don't care.
Yep.
And it obviously sells incredibly well, so it's not about trying to boost sales or anything like that. It's
Even with
just,
having record lows, it's still beating every other game. Like they're
Right.
yeah,
having record low
yeah,
numbers for Call of Duty and still crushing other games. So yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's one of those ones they had a sale planned, and it's like, well, what was the smallest discount on any Blizzard game during the BattleNet sale? It was Diablo 4, but they put it on sale.
right. I was still I was still very surprised to see it. Um,
Yeah. Makes sense.
it just because it's still so new. Um, it felt off to me. Okay.
You're
Um,
you
oh,
I'm gonna give a little more clarity there too. You are in like the literal kickoff to hot title season. Madden came out 2 weeks ago. Starfield is tonight as of this recording. It's actually 9 p.m. tonight in physical retail stores. NBA 2K is Friday. They're gonna lose. I mean, I know that probably you guys will play those games, but I'm literally wearing my NBA jersey right now because I'm excited about 2K. I'm gonna play 2K when it comes out.
I'm
That's
yeah,
fair. That's fair.
yeah.
I have that shirt as well too.
I
But the point
also
is,
have that shirt.
we have 2K
We
this
should
week.
all
You have
wear that
Mortal
shirt
Kombat,
sometime.
the Diablo.
Sure.
But Mortal Kombat is next week, right? Week after that, you have
Yeah.
the Mortal Kombat Standard Edition. You have Assassin's Creed Mirage coming early October. Spider-Man 2 come. I mean, like you're hitting like every week. There's 2 to 3 giant launches. You're going to see a lot of aggressive sales tactics to get more units sold. This is going to happen across the entire industry. We as consumers benefit from that. So yay, that's awesome. But yeah, it is a little weird to see Diablo go on sale as quick as it is, but it's also Activision, so they can afford it.
So, yeah, I'm not worried about their cash flow. Um, I've also spent more on games this year than ever. Um,
I've still spent more on Diablo 4 than any of the other games all I've bought combined.
hmm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, but it's okay. It's okay. Uh,
As you look at Lilith behind you.
yeah.
I got I
Yep.
got the little the
I
goat
saw
man.
that you got your goat man.
Yeah.
I haven't got that yet. I need to.
I don't know if you can actually see it. Is it in frame? Oh yeah, I also bought the Hell Key.
Nice.
Oh, see, that was sold out by the time I tried to get to it.
It's back in stock.
Oh, I'm going right now.
Yeah. That
And
the what was it? The Lilith goblet that I was like that sold out like instantly. It came back in stock like a week later, and I bought one.
mm,
It still hasn't shipped yet, but it'll ship eventually. There's
there's a goblin
so
in
many of
there,
their
so
things. Yeah, there's so many things that they
Yeah,
like
it's back.
sell out and
Hell yeah.
restock. Yeah.
mm,
Thank
That was
you, sir.
Oh, you're most welcome. That was actually what was it? The Arthas's crown, the crown of domination, sold out. I wanted to get that, and then it came back. Like I think like that one was like a day later that they
hmm.
restocked it or
I want that Diablo backpack as well. Sorry, we're totally being shills right
Yeah.
now, but
So
yeah.
I will point out, and I
If
think
anything, if you're still listening to the end of this podcast, you can see our true feelings that we still care about the franchise and the game, despite if we ever get like too negative or anything like that. It's just because it's from a place of love, as
well,
Nerdwords had mentioned earlier.
yeah, and I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, I don't like. There's a sentiment of like, if you don't like the game, you should just keep playing it endlessly, anyways. And that is the dumbest shit I've ever heard. Right? The best way you can send a message to any developer is stop playing. They told us they're looking at telemetry. Okay, stop
Wow.
giving them data. Stop. Right? Stop doing that. And maybe that'll send a message and improve the game. Now, if you're loving the game, dude, enjoy that shit. My girlfriend is in there playing right now. She's been playing all week. She's obsessed. She loves it. But she also just turns on a podcast and just starts jamming and killing some monsters. And that's awesome. I'm glad that she loves that part of it. She's also not even level 100 yet, and I'm almost level 100 on my second character. So there's also that too. But it's just, dude, we would never stop anyone from enjoying Diablo or any game for that matter. But I also feel like we talked a lot earlier about integrity in gaming journalism. I don't feel like it's fair to be a Diablo fan and not be honest about how we feel. And the honest truth is there's problems with the game. And I'm really hopeful it's going to get better. But like Nine said, it's from a place of love. We just want the game to be successful. And we want to spend the next 10 years playing it. I just hope that annualized expansions don't turn it into something different. I hope those expansions are worthy of being expansions. I just want to know what happens to Nayrel. Let me go to Karast again. I'm this close on the map. Let me get there, please.
Just across the river.
Just
throw
across the
snow away.
goddamn river. Just give me the rest of Kyrgyzstan, please. I'm hopeful for a lot, but they've got to kind of win me back a little bit still, and I don't think I'm the only one, and I think that's okay.
No, I think that's a fair point. It would be disingenuous to do this podcast and just be like, this is the best. Let's talk about our nightmare dungeon. Because that's never how this podcast has been. And I
Yeah,
think it is a critique and not just vitriol, right?
yeah.
I like that we dovetail here at the end into throwing more money at Diablo because
It
that's
wasn't
what
intentional. That key is badass though. Like that
no,
key is
but
badass.
like
Yeah, right. I mean, same. Just not.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's the dichotomy is you can you can be disappointed with certain parts, but we're still very much in love with the franchise.
yeah,
And that's not changing. The game is changing. And what we're
yeah.
hoping is that the game changes more in ways that we would find more enjoyable. And I think that'll be a common theme as we kind of move into October soon, as we get to the season of blood, and we get more details, right, about what is coming next. So I think the only thing to do is close it out as we always do with a moo, moo, moo.
Moo, 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 moo.
Moustache.